Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You ready to get your dunce cap back on? I know I am. It's time for more Stupid Moves 101 with Peridiam, Purred Man, Purred Happily. Following part 1, this is part 2 of the top 10 underrated dumb moves in Survivor, featuring the top 5 underrated dumb moves in Survivor. Up next, a dumb move in Survivor. Thank you, Purred. Indeed, we are back. If you haven't watched part 1 of this 2-part series, I recommend watching it, maybe even first. These are all dumb moves that I don't think get rated highly enough compared to, say, the usual suspects of the Survivor world.
Would love to blindside Jason because he'd be 2-0. The ladies. Just at the jugular, flossing my teeth with his jugular.
Whether it's overplaying, underplaying, or just not playing at all, let's continue this disappointing birthday party going into number 5. Similar to number 6 on the top 10 list in part 1, number 5 is going to be a two-parter, actually tying in with number 4. The 5th underrated dumb move in Survivor is way back in the 3rd season, Survivor Africa, when at the final 9, Brandon Quinton chose to betray his entire tribe of Samburu to instead side with Lex, Ethan, Big Tom, and Kim, the Boran boys, ultimately giving them the advantage while also dooming his own game.
I don't want to be with the team anymore. I just don't want it. It is absolutely horrible. This is horrible. I want to do the merge and start having individual competitions. It's everybody for themselves.
Now, unlike the previous moves, this particularly bad move is cut from a different kind of cloth, and I really think it's one of the most unique ones on the list. It goes back to the idea of image, knowing how you will come across when the show airs on national television. In the case of Colby, who is often recognized as making one of the worst moves in all of Survivor, he knew that taking Keith wouldn't make him the good guy to America because Keith just wasn't deserving of being in the final 2. To maintain his image, he took Tina, fully knowing it could be a grave mistake.
But here's a guy sitting next to you who basically gave up $900,000 because he didn't want you to have it.
Well, you know, call Colby a fool then.
Brandon's move in Africa is quite similar, though I think it's also quite dumb. See, at the final 9, the tribe division was 5-4. 5 Boran versus 4 Samburu. However, one of the Boran was Kelly, and she was ready to flip on her other tribe members to join Samburu. Hooray! The 4 Samburu plus Kelly would vote for Lex, the mastermind, and boom, a much clearer path to the finish line. Sounds like a good idea, one each member of Samburu could get on board with. Except Brandon. Brandon, well, he was a young gay man who had a rivalry throughout the season with another Samburu tribe member, Frank. Frank was a homophobe. Brandon didn't like Frank. Understandable. Instead of going with Frank and the rest of Samburu, Brandon could join Lex and Boran, despite not getting along with any of them except Lex himself. Brandon is divided now, and what should have been a clear 5-4 vote to vote out Lex suddenly puts him as the swing vote.
My old team is looking for me to do what we talked about yesterday, which is vote for Lex. But then again, Lex flat out told me this morning they're wanting me to vote Kelly off tonight. Now I'm feeling like I'm in a power play position, and that wasn't what I had planned. It's very awkward for me, and I don't know what I'm going to do yet. Honestly, don't know.
The concept of helping Frank advance in the game was just too much. So instead of helping his longtime allies make it to the end, he flipped on all of them and doomed their collective chances. Apparently, his desire to spite Frank was stronger than his desire to either attempt to win the game or at least aid his allies. Brandon flipped on Samburu, voted out Kelly, and then was voted out in the next episode despite not even making it further than Frank after all. Which brings me to the number 4 underrated dumb move in Survivor. We're pulling an all-nighter in the African safari. Best keep a lookout for those wild animals circling the encampment, because number 4 is going to be what happens after Brandon flips on Samburu at the final 8 of Survivor Africa. I swear, I don't even dislike this season, but man, oh man, do I have some bones to pick at the final 9 and the final 8. The only thing worse than dooming your chances of winning the game, as well as your allies' chances, is failing to recognize you actually still had a way out to win the game, or at least do better in spite of your dumb move. Yes, Brandon flipping was strategically terrible. It gave the Boran tribe a little more power when they were totally exposed, but what comes next, to me, is just as bad, if not worse, because it comes at the hands of more competent players who just failed to seize the opportunity.
I don't really trust Brandon. But if he's willing to turn like that on those people and on Kim and on his friends...
It was so shocking to me because I've trusted Brandon for 24 straight days. He's been my friend, so I thought what he said was, you know, going to be true, and I'm really burnt up today for sure. I mean, I can't understand it.
Okay, so here's the setup. We're at the final 8. Brandon just flipped. There's 4 Samburu and 4 Boran. Samburu is upset at Brandon, and rightfully so. They kind of don't like the spoiled, entitled, bratty millennial. The Gen Xer. But it's at this point we have T-Bird and Kim Powers who are up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. That is until they recognize they actually do kind of have a paddle, a very potent paddle. It's made of the finest wood, handcrafted by Richard Hatch himself, as he whispers to them in spirit, "Don't be dumb. Use the Force." T-Bird and Kim have Frank on their side. They have 3 out of 8. They just needed Brandon and Frank to work together for half of a second to stand a chance at winning $1 million. Are the stakes not high enough to reconcile a difference? I get the severity of the difference and I don't want to undersell it, but I do think that when you're playing a game for $1 million...
So the old Samburu tribe is not very happy with me. I wasn't going to align myself with Frank. That wasn't going to happen, and they should have known better than that, so that's pretty much my main motivation. I would rather be out of here, in 3 days than for anybody back home to say that I had aligned with Frank in any way.
I understand this was only season 3, but the gameplay in the post-merge of season 2 was pretty on point from at least several players. The game wasn't that unknown at this point. In other words, I'm not cutting either Brandon or Frank much slack to look beyond their default setting to make the better move.
The key to success on this one with Frank and Brandon is working together closely, hands-on participation.
They definitely found their rhythm together.
Frank is very abrasive and, kind of cold, and he doesn't have that kind of warm side to offset his less than charming personality.
Take the cards that I'm dealt with and make the best of them. It was difficult enough for me personally, but hey, it's a movie. You be quiet and you watch the damn movie. Yeah, the company could have been better, but we simply had popcorn, we had pop, we watched a movie. It's history, it's over with. Let's move forward.
At this point in the game, Big Tom had the most votes cast against him, and Samburu knew that. I mean, technically Lex did, but he had immunity, so whatever. And because tiebreakers were resolved by past votes, all Samburu had to do was vote for Big Tom. But even crazier than that is that Samburu didn't even need Brandon to vote with them. What? So let's break this down. The way the votes broke out, Lex and Brandon voted for Frank, while Ethan, Tom, and Kim Johnson voted for Brandon. So if T-Bird, Kim Powers, and Frank voted for Tom, guess what happens on the revote? Of course, yes, this is a bit results-oriented, and yes, it is just technically Season 3, and yes, perhaps I'm asking too much from a group of adults to perform simple math in a game 3 seasons deep in the pursuit of $1 million, but hey, whatever, by my standards, it's an underrated dumb move.
They smell the Final Four, those guys. And that's the one thing that makes me a little nervous about Frank and about Teresa, is they could be so close to the Final Four if they side with Brandon.
Samburu consistently shit the bed despite it being their own bed that they were sleeping in. They had control for 2 rounds and they still couldn't get their act together. Instead, all piling on Brandon and voting him out 6-2. This is like if at the end of Star Wars Episode 4, Luke somehow fails to blow up the Death Star with that precise shot at the end. The opportunity was there. You're playing a game for $1 million. Open your eyes. Look beyond yourself. Use the Force, Samburu. Number 3. If missing the right move isn't bad enough, what about when you make the right calls just about the entire season, only to then overplay your hand at the final moments, ultimately costing you the win? Number 3 is all about Rafe Judkins from Survivor Guatemala, particularly at the end of the season when he's sitting rather pretty at the final 5 with a nice alliance of 4 against a single, lone, chief-wearing stranger on the outs in Danny Boatwright, or better known as that one lady who somehow won the season against all the odds. Essentially, Rafe done goofed at the final 5 and the final 4. Danny didn't win immunity at either the final 5 or the final 4, so she was totally exposed. The simple fact of the matter is, Danny outmaneuvered him and beat him at his own social manipulation. She convinced him that she was better for his chances to reach the end because she intended to take him if she won the final 3 immunity. I mean, who doesn't want to be in the final 3 where both parties intend to take you to the final 2?
Danny's promised me she'd take me to the final 2. That's a huge degree of security at the end of a crazy, crazy game. I think it's definitely possible that people could want to get rid of Danny at this point, but nothing could really change my mind about voting out Cindy.
But of course, Danny wasn't stupid. She knew Rafe didn't intend to take her to the end over the likes of Stephanie. Really though, Rafe tried to position his endgame as best he could to prevent Stephanie from taking anyone to the final tribal council other than himself. By voting out Lydia at the final 4, as dumb as it was in hindsight, he was attempting to prevent Steph from having the option to take someone she perceived as a goat. He also thought that Lydia, the fishmonger lady, lady who had yet to even show a bit of physical prowess could possibly win the final immunity challenge over the likes of Danny, who was pretty sick toward the end of the season, but still a pretty fit woman. Again, you're overthinking it, Rafe.
Steph's like, you know, the two of us need to get to the final two, and we should keep Lydia, and then we'll have a better shot of winning the final three immunity challenge. I mean, as possible, it's a better strategic decision, but like, I promised Danny that I was gonna go to final three with her.
Lydia wasn't winning that challenge, and in all honesty, I think Stephanie will still take Rafe to the end. By voting out Lydia at 4, he was allowing Danny to do what he intended to prevent Stephanie from doing had he kept Lydia. And really, why would you take out Cindy at the final 5? That woman was on the outs, was not a social threat in the least. Plus, she won the car. And if there's any one curse that's likely legit in Survivor, and it's not Mololo, it's the infamous car curse. Cindy wasn't winning. Lydia wasn't winning. It was you and Steph. You overplayed. You tried to have your cake and eat it too. And now here we are, number 3.
Why would Steph be the right choice?
Well, she made a lot of people mad at her in the game and would be the easier choice if you wanted a better chance at winning the million.
Number 2. Number 2 is when Brandon Hantz, in all his authority and glory, gave up immunity at the final 5 of Survivor South Pacific, only to then get voted out right after, not but 10 minutes later in the episode. Sound kind of familiar? Yeah, it's a lot like Erik from Survivor Micronesia, the one we all actually hear about. So why don't we hear about Brandon's debacle? The first reason, his appearance on Caramon completely overshadows the moment. Second, the whole religious state of mind aspect. Erik wasn't coming from a place of righteousness where Brandon was, and I guess he just wasn't in the right state of mind when he made the choice to give away his immunity necklace. I think this final 5 is a truly fascinating moment in the history of Survivor, maybe even one of the most fascinating. Brandon is the target at the final 5 between himself, Coach, Sophie, Albert, and Rick. But then Brandon wins immunity, so the target shifts to Albert. Albert's game gets blown up by everyone. Albert gets caught double dealing, which nobody ever does in Survivor, and suddenly all sights are on him. The thing is, Brandon doesn't want Albert to go deep down. And frankly, neither does Albert. They both want Sophie out of the game, who they view as a viable threat to win. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good read. Coach happened to be in alliance with Brandon, but he was also in a tight alliance with Sophie and Albert too. So Coach was now kind of stuck in the middle.
I'm telling you right now, bro, I've been watching what she says at these tribals. To me, she's the #1 threat. I disagree with that totally. I'd rather sit at the end with Brandon and Sophie. I'm pleading to you to believe me that Sophie is a bigger threat than Brandon at the end. Is a bigger threat. Because they're not going to respect the way he played the game.
Here's the crazy thing. Brandon was the biggest threat to win the game at this point, outside of Ozzy reaching the end thanks to Redemption Island. This is a little known fact most fans of the show don't realize, but all sources from the jury of South Pacific have noted that Brandon outright wins the game if he reaches the final tribal council. Believe it or not, he was a huge threat to win, and both Coach and Sophie recognized this. When Brandon decides to give up his immunity necklace, he rationalized it by saying that he doesn't think Coach or Albert will vote for him. He truly thinks they will vote for Sophie.
If I have to, I'll give Albert my immunity, and Coach will not vote for me, Albert will not vote for me, and I'll vote for Sophie.
Like I said, Brandon wants Sophie out, but with Albert exposed and having his game blown up the afternoon before Tribal Council, Albert's a dead man walking without immunity. Coach is fine with discarding Albert, so Brandon strategically forces Coach's hand by taking his target off the board, thinking that Coach won't turn on him either, and that he'll have to take out Sophie now. Basically what I'm saying is while Erik giving up immunity was cringeworthy and definitely a dumb move, I'd wager Brandon's wasn't much better. He failed to recognize how much of a threat he was to win, and he tried to position the pieces on the board in a way to get what he wanted. Sure, his decision to save Albert was partly emotional, but make no mistake, it was also strategic. It was a blunder, but a strategic blunder no less. Coach wanted Brandon out this round, and once he gave Coach the option to do so, it was nothing shy of a done deal. Despite all the talk of God and religion and moral righteousness, really this was just a few people trying to come to terms with having to manipulate, lie, and backstab each other all in the name of pursuing a huge payload.
And it makes it so hard to determine right from wrong.
I honestly believe that this is what God wants us to do.
Well, no. Remember now, this is what God wants you to do.
Well, I tell you what.
But what I need to do right now is I need to pray. And I promise you this, I will do whatever God tells me to do.
I understand you gotta do what God wants you to do, but I know He doesn't want you to write my name down, man.
Erik, you done goofed too. You're not off the hook, but the wool was pulled over Brandon's eyes just as much. At least you were taken out by Serene Parvati.
Brandon made one of the stupidest moves ever to be made and gave his necklace away.
Whenever you give up immunity necklace, your ass is going home. He's playing the game like he's playing with God, and he's not. He's playing with human beings that are greedy and want that money.
Number 1. I can't believe after all this, we still have a number 1 to get to. Oh baby, I'm stoked. Indeed, it's when the infamous Jeff Varner jumped in the water and threw away an immunity challenge at the final 10 of Survivor, the Australian Outback. All in the name of getting some apples and peanut butter, only to then see himself get voted out to the next tribal council, dooming his entire tribe for the rest of the season. Again, for peanut butter. I think most of us know about this idiotic move, but I can't stress enough how dumb it was even at the time. This isn't even a hindsight is 2020 or, oh, it was just season 2 kind of thing. This is just straight up dumb. And unlike some other dumb moves such as the Monono tribe giving away immunity, which was also real bad, I don't think Jeff's move gets the appropriate level of embarrassment in contrast to just how dumb it is. Really, I think this dumb move comes from a place of arrogance and haphazard disregard for the implication his move had, not only on his game, but the games of those around him. At the final 10, the two tribes merged. It's 5-5, which means the vote is going to be deadlocked, which then means we're gonna have previous votes come into play to break the tie.
I'm listening to y'all talking, it's me. Plus Kimmy, on the first reward challenge, they asked who Deb voted for, and Kimmy said Jeff. So they know that I have a vote against me. We're anticipating a 5-5 tie in the first vote. And in the rules, when there's a deadlock tie, the person with the most votes accumulated to that point is the one to leave.
Do you think they remember Jeff? Because I had totally forgotten about that.
It's never left my mind.
Now, Jeff had 2 votes cast against him in the pre-merge. He was the only player on Kucha to have votes cast against him and still be in the game. Over on Ogakor, however, Jerry also had 2 votes cast against her, while Keith had 3. So if Kucha votes for Keith and Ogakor votes for Jeff, well, so long Colby, Tina, Jerry, the rest of the gang, this is Varner's season to lose. But to make matters, and this move even worse, Ogakor knew that Jeff had at least a vote or 2 on him at this point. It's been speculated that Kimmy unassumingly told Ogakor that Jeff was voted for in the pre-merge, but Kucha knew that Kimmy blabbed. So when Jeff is the only player at the merge on the Kucha tribe to have prior votes cast against him, the biggest, most important aspect for the entire tribe and his entire game is to simply win immunity. That's it. At that point, it almost didn't matter what happened next because Kucha would win the day as everyone else had no votes cast against them. But Jeff also knew that if he didn't win immunity, it's guaranteed Ogakor votes for him, which also means Kucha has to vote for the right person or they're completely screwed. I can't stress enough how important this one immunity challenge was, especially for Kucha, especially for Jeff Varner.
That one bite of peanut butter was better than any of the wine and cheese and crackers. Shut up. Come on over to the dark side, Joe.
If you don't think you can outstand us, then I would go, because you're not going to get that late.
Not if y'all are going to vote me off, though.
Now, see, you hear that, Joe? What? Look at these women. They're bound to determine the
And the challenge was literally just standing on a stump for the longest amount of time. It wasn't even something he was unlikely to win. So Keith wins immunity, the Kucha tribe goes on to vote for Colby, who had no votes cast against him, while the Ogakor tribe voted for Jeff, who had 2 votes cast against him. And yeah, it's such a preventable outcome, and it only took but sheer stupidity to will it into existence.
I knew this was going to happen because of a very large mouth of a former tribe member at Kucha. Ogakor knew I had that vote, and I knew there was nothing I could do about it.
And that is the entire top 10 list of the underrated dumbest moves in Survivor. What do you guys think? Was I fair to these moves? A little harsh? Maybe not harsh enough? Would you say peanut butter tastes like $1,000,000?
Peanut butter!
Either way, thank you guys so much for sticking through with this entire top 10. As always, my name is Peridiam saying I hope you guys enjoyed the series. Don't forget to grab your torch on the way out, and I'll see you in the next video once I decide that I don't think I want to give individual immunity to Natalie after all.
I handed you the plate and you were like, I don't want this.
I'm not annoyed with you. I'm ready to get to the challenge.
Free offer of chocolate. I'm just curious.
Let's go.
I got the message, brother. We'll go when I'm ready.
I only know how to play the game one way, and that's full tilt. And if that makes me a threat, then so be it. But this is the only way I know how.